most times we had 200 to 300 people on a Wednesday night. And that's because of his gift to reach people. And what he would do at the end of his talk on Wednesday, he talked very short, believe it or not. And then he would open up the floor for questions. And the questions were the things that people had on their mind. And I just want to say this, that, and I was just saying it to Brother Shakir, that periods in history, when Master Fard Muhammad was in Detroit, and he began to teach, remember 1930, but it was a period where people were migrating from the South, from here in Alabama, yes, and leaving their land, leaving their property, because persecution, the Holy Quran says, is worse than slaughter. Yes, sir. And our people were being persecuted and slaughtered in the South. That trip that I made to the museum today was really an eye-opener. And I'm thinking that I was overseas when all of this happened, because I didn't read it, I didn't know it. And it was an eye-opener for me, believe me. It touched me, because I looked at 1919, starting about 1912, and the lynching went on very heavy right into the early 20s. Yes, sir. And when you read the history, W.E.B. Du Bois, he wrote about it. They had demonstrations in New York and Washington against lynching. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had a headline on the Muhammad Speaks. It said, "History repeats itself." Yes, sir. You have to have been around for a while to see that. That's right. Yes, this is for the Over the Hill gang. The younger brothers and sisters, you may not know that, but he had a headline, "History repeats itself." And the repeat of that history we're living in right now.
Yes, sir.
The brother that they're going to bury in Birmingham tomorrow, look how he was shot down and killed. And look at the killings across the country. It wasn't until they convicted the police officer in Chicago for killing Laquan McDonald. And he's the first police officer convicted guilty of murder. And they didn't do that because they're so fair and balanced and just. They did it because they saw a problem.
Come on, brother.
They knew that Chicago would explode.
Yes, sir.
It may go to other cities, because here's a clear case, video camera of that policeman shooting that young man 16 times when he was crossing that street.
Yes, sir.
And the reason that the mayor, Ron Emanuel, is not running is because of this case. Yes, sir. Because he's a part of covering up the case.
Right. Yes, sir.
And I'm only saying that because when we walked through that museum and we looked at the lynchings that took place, black people were protesting across the country, led by W.E.B. Du Bois, to try to stop the lynching of our people across this country. And so when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad called him Shaitan, and taught his followers that he was a devil, a lot of people call that hate and this and that. They said a lot of things. But when you look at his deeds, hanging, if you get the book Without Sanctuary,
yes, sir.
When the book first came out, Minister Farrakhan held it up to the brothers and sisters. And when you read that book, it shakes you.
Yes, sir.
And you're wondering what kind of human being could do what has been done to us as a devil. So I came here because a brother that I met, the circumstances of me meeting him was I was in Africa, and I'm going to try to use this map today. I don't have a laser pointer, but I'm going to try to use this map. I was in Africa. I was living in Ghana. As most of you know, I lived in Ghana for 12 years. The minister sent me there in 1990 to open our first office on the African continent at the invitation of the president. And there was a problem in Liberia, big problem. Those of you who like to read, because the history of Liberia is fascinating, because it represents the slaves who went back to Africa.
Yes, sir.
And there was a society here of white folks who knew that God was going to punish them for what they did to us. And all you have to do is walk through that museum, and you could say, if there is a God,
that's right,
and he's a just God,
yes, sir,
and these folks gotta pay.
That's right.
And that's not hate teaching.
No, sir.
That's the law that you find in the Quran
That's right.
and the Bible. But
That's
the country of Liberia, how I got here tonight, that's my first point. I'm gonna try to make it quick. The country of Liberia was settled in 1823. It became a republic in 1847. But how it happened, there was a group called the American Recolonization Society. And they felt that the only solution to the slave problem was to send them back to Africa. Otherwise, America would suffer. And America is suffering right now.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I went from the country that I lived in, Ghana, which is right here. Now these maps are for sale, okay? And I would hope that you would get a map of Africa and take the picture of Beyonce and Jay-Z. You don't have to get rid of it, just move it over on the wall so that your children can come up and look at Africa.
Yes, sir.
I believe in that because geography, when you weaken geography, you weaken history.
Yes, sir.
Because you don't know where nothing is at. I live right here in this country of Ghana. And it's an important country in our history because Martin Luther King decided to go to Africa in 1957. Most black Americans know nothing about it. And you should ask, why is it that they don't talk about it? What is it that white folks hide the fact? How many in here knew King went to Africa? 2, 3 people. So why on his birthday don't they talk about King's historic trip to Africa in 1957 when Ghana became independent? Because they don't want you to link with Africa. They don't want you to look at it as a place that you come from and there should be some linkage. They don't want that. And for whatever their reason is that they hate us, but they don't want to let us go.
That's right.
That's something that's like Pharaoh.
That's right.
First Pharaoh said, let them go. And then when they were moving out, Pharaoh said, kill them all.
That's right.
So that's the kind of thing you got. So let me go on. Now I'm a little long with it. And at my age, you tell stories, okay? So I'm going to try to speed it up somewhat. So I went from Ghana to this beautiful little country right here called Liberia. And the president at that time, just elected, was a man named Charles Taylor. How many heard that name? He was the president. He was elected by the people. But America didn't like him because of his relationship with Muammar Gaddafi and Libya. They had a problem with him. And, but it's a long story, and you know how to make a long story short. Don't tell it, okay? So I can't tell the whole story. But I went and I asked Mr. Taylor, President Taylor, that why don't he come to America and make a people-to-people trip and raise money for all of they were not refugees. Refugees is when you leave your country and you're in another country, you're a refugee.
Yes, sir.
But when you're in your country and you're displaced from your home, you're called displaced individuals, and they put you in camps right in your own country. So when I asked President Taylor that, he said, Akbar, I cannot go to America. I didn't understand why. He said, I escaped from prison in America. And made his way back to Africa, and if I go to America, they will arrest me. So then we talked about it a little while. I said, well, why don't you send your wife? She's a good Christian woman. She's very articulate. She's right now the vice president of Liberia as we stand here. So he said yes. So I put together a team, a man named Earl Shenholster. Anybody know that name in here? Earl Shenholster. Look it up, Google it, okay? He was the president of the NAACP for a short period of time before Kwesi Mfumi became the president. So we got together, we picked a date. His wife was going to fly from Liberia to America, and we were going to start in Atlanta, Georgia, then come to Montgomery. The person who was going to host it in Montgomery, which he did, was Reverend John Orford. That's how I ended up meeting John Orford. And on their way from Atlanta, they did Atlanta first. My daughter was organizing this because right as we got ready to do this tour, the minister got a call from Gaddafi in Libya. There was a big conference and he wanted the minister to come and speak at it. And, you know, I was like the minister's ambassador to Libya, so I couldn't make the trip. So I asked my daughter and Earl Shenholster to do the trip, and right as they got into Tuskegee, is Tuskegee a county?
No, sir, it's a city.
City, okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, what county is it in?
Macon County.
Right after they crossed into Macon County, right near Tuskegee, the tire, a Ford four-wheel drive with Firestone tires. That's a story in itself. Firestone bought 1 million acres in Liberia for 9 cents an acre. I thought it was 3, but when I got to Liberia recently, they said, no, it was 9 cents an acre. And they still own the land. And the Ford family married into the Firestone family. And Ford, in that marriage, they agreed, show you how marriage is a business, that all Ford cars would have Firestone tires. And so the tire, and they were having a problem with this tire. The car flipped over. And I want to tell you this little caveat. I'm telling you how I ended up here today. When my daughter was sitting in the car, a brother named Adimar, some of the Muslims may know. So he's the minister's director of special events. I asked Adimar to help. Adimar was driving, it was his car, and my daughter was sitting in the front seat with him. And then Earl Shenholster, they picked him up. And I want you to look up Earl Shenholster. And he was getting in the back, and my daughter said, no, I'll get in the back. He said, no, you can stay there. But because she was born a Muslim and Muslim culture, you know, you don't ride in the front seat with a man who's not your husband, and 2 men in the car, and you sitting in the front. Just her mindset. It wasn't important, but she insisted that she get in the back. She told Mr. Shenholster that I have some paperwork to do about the tour anyway, and it would give me the room in the back. So when the car turned over, Shenholster was in the front, and he died. And how he died, his legs were cut off in the accident, and they couldn't get him out of the car to try to stop the bleeding.
He bled out.
And he bled to death. My daughter was thrown out of the car by the will of Allah, and 11 bones were broken in her body. So I had lived here 4 to 6 months, I can't tell you, here. My wife and I actually got an apartment here, and it was John Orford who got the apartment for me to come to Montgomery while she was at the hospital here, South something.
Jackson.
What is it?
Jackson.
Baptist South.
Baptist
She was in that hospital, and they operated on her leg 3 times, but they could never put it back together or fuse it together. So she has a permanent limb. And so quite naturally we sued Ford. That's another story for another time. But John Orford and I became friends. So he invited me while I was living here to speak to a group of preachers, because I was trying to get them to go to Africa. I knew that black men and women, before God takes you, need to put your feet on African soil.
Yes, sir.
Because this is where you came from.
Yes, sir.
White man taught you so much negative stuff.
Yes, sir.
You don't want to, every time he shows you children starving to death, flies all over them, AIDS, Ebola, you know, coups, counter coups, killing and all of that. So you don't want to go to Africa. You have no desire. That's why the generation above me say, boy, I don't need to go to Africa. I ain't lost nothing there, and I don't need it. That's a Negro mentality.
That's right. That's right.
The white man, when he gets in a position of power, he goes to Europe.
That's right.
He searches out where his parents and great-grandparents came from, if they were Italian. The DNA test that's being done now, the white people are searching out where they came from.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And most black people who are doing it, and I have to say, Earl, have you done your DNA?
No, sir.
Okay. It's on sale now. So, when they started it, it was $600. You know how much it is now? $49.
Yeah.
And you know who the leaders are in it? Can somebody tell me? The Mormons.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Mormons,
That's true.
Ancestry.com is owned by the Mormons.
Yes, sir.
You say why? Because the Mormons believe that your dead relatives can be baptized if you can identify them. And they got a big operation.
Yeah.
We went to Salt Lake City. We saw the size of the building that they're operating out to do this DNA. So this is how I got here. So one day, Reverend Austin said, Akbar, why don't you speak to the pastors? I saw most of them today. A couple of them I remember clearly. The man on the front row who had done some business, they mentioned Benin, but that's not the first place he went in Africa. You know, I'm sitting there, and I really wanted to give greetings from Minister Farrakhan when I called the minister to tell him that Reverend Orford had died and his daughter invited me to the funeral. I thought I was going to speak. I wasn't going to push myself up there and so forth. But when they said that he went to Benin first, that's not true. So he brought me in front of all of these preachers, and I preached Africa to them. I talked about the history of Africa, and I hinted that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, my teacher, said that we're going to separate either in Africa or somewhere else. And most people take that part of his teaching and put it way up on the shelf. Because in their heart and mind, they won't leave white folks.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, right.
Someone used to say to me,
Go ahead, brother.
go to a place with all Negroes? Not me. See, so you feel, see, there's something inside of you. You think in order to have life and to have the pleasures of life and the so-called freedom, it's got to be a white man helping you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I mean, that's where we are. So, gets me in front of the preachers. I go to preaching about Africa. They sitting there, all of them preachers now. I'm a Muslim. So, you know, there was a little kind of thing. I'm looking with this Muslim man talking. Muslim. So, after I finished, one of them got up, because I opened the floor for questions. One of them got and said, Mr. Muhammad, he said, we don't know you. In other words, he was really saying, you a black monster. And don't come here and tell nothing about why we should go to Africa. He said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Reverend Orford brought you here. We know him. So we're going to send him to Africa with you and let him come back and make a report. I said, all praise is due to Allah.
That's right.
And he went to Africa with me. And we became brothers and friends. I first took him to Ghana. I took him to the slave dungeons. It really blew his mind. And then I took him, I let him meet officials and so forth. And by there's a lot of Christians in leadership in Ghana, even though the population may be more Muslims in Ghana. People never say that. And then we made a trip over to Liberia. And that was a heck of a trip. We went to the camps after the war. We met with Charles Taylor, who was the president. We spoke to a group there, but it was a great trip. And then he came back preaching it. He ended up, because of what I did to him in terms of, he said, opening his eyes. Because when he was a young man, he was in a place where he was in contact with a lot of Muslims. And so he petitioned the University of Alabama to give me an honorary doctorate degree. And he said, because of my work in Africa, and myself and a brother from the Cameroons who I saw today at his funeral, he spoke at his funeral, and we got our honorary doctorate degree. And I don't, you know, some people call me Dr. Akbar Muhammad, but some people feel that you want to be called doctor to add some height to yourself. That's why I just say, call me Brother Akbar.
Go ahead, sir.
So that's why I'm here. I came, and Allah blessed me. I came, whatever was ailing him, they couldn't operate here in Montgomery. So they sent him to Birmingham. And one of our brothers there called me and said that Reverend Orford is pretty sick and he's in the hospital here in Birmingham. And I immediately, I didn't know if he was going to live. I thought I was older than him, but he's 2 years older than me. I'm only 76, okay? So, and I went to the hospital. I took my family, we got around the bed, we prayed and we talked, and he was talking business to us, the things that he would like to do, see. So I made a quick turnaround when I found out that he had passed. His daughter called me with one of our brothers on the phone and asked me would I please come because he talked about me all the time. And so that's why I'm here tonight, okay? So I'm gonna try to hurry the other things up. One of the brothers just asked me in the back about the Congo, is it a good place to buy land? There's 54 countries in Africa. There may be 55 if they solve the problem of the Western Sahara here in the Polisario. And may end up, they may break away from Morocco and become another country. So I told my brother, there's two Congos. There's Congo Brazzaville and there's Congo Kinshasa. The official name is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In the old days, Muhammad Ali made it famous by what? Can somebody tell me? The rumble in the jungle. I know I'm talking to another generation. The rumble in the jungle, and the country was called what then? Zaire. That's right. And but when Kabila, who's a revolutionary guy, overthrew Mobutu, he changed the country to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that they call it the DRC. And then you have Congo Brazzaville. This country only has 8 million people. This one has, they say it's 50 million, but 41 is the official count. So I was telling the brother that this is a rough country. Yeah, they got a lot of land, a lot of riches, enough wealth here to rebuild Europe, but you got to be ready for going to the Congo. So I'm going to go ahead with my talk tonight. I'll try to go through it quickly. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that Master Fard Muhammad gave him 104 books to read. Now, many people, they call me all the time, the books, can you give me a list of the 104 books? No, I cannot. But all I know is 2 books that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his student mentioned. One was The Outline of History by Wells, and another one that I got an original copy is The Story of Mankind by Van Loon. This was published in 1926, 4 years before the Savior stood up in Detroit. And the part about it is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said every one of the books had an aspect of Prophet Muhammad's life, showing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad something about his mission. This book is really interesting. When I was a young Muslim in New York, I used it all the time because the chapter that talks about Napoleon, it can remind you of the Nation of Islam. People didn't like Napoleon, but the young men who saw his soldiers marching through the streets of Paris, they just felt that they wanted to be involved in what was happening. And it was the same thing with the nation.
That's right.
I used to hear brothers in Harlem, where I grew up as a Muslim, say that when I get ready to get married, I'm going to join the nation, I'm going to become a Muslim, so I can get one of them beautiful MGT sisters. See, that's their thinking. But they didn't just jump into the nation, but they looked at the nation and they were moved by it. In the chapter in this book by Napoleon. Now, we talked about the book so much in the 70s in particular that somebody went and researched the copyright on it and found out that it was expired and nobody renewed it. And so now this book has been printed and it's in paperback and you can get a copy. You can order it on Amazon. But, if you get the book, it's a piece of history. If you don't like history, you probably would not be able to read the book. Another book I want to, this is Liberia, the land and people of Liberia. And as I read this book, the part that really got me, I wish I could have went on to finish it. I got halfway through the book. But it's how when the slaves who left America got to Liberia, they realized that they had to write a constitution. If you read the history of Liberia, there's the Americo-Liberians. Those are the descendants of the slaves who came there. And then there's the indigenous people who were found there. The land wasn't empty.
Yes, sir.
But when the slaves, the ex-slaves got there, they only had the mindset of their slave master. And whatever way their slave master treated them, that's the way they treated the indigenous people. Until finally, they realized that we have to write a constitution. That's what really impressed me about it. We have to write a constitution that speaks to us. And that was the beautiful part about it. So I want to talk about a few things tonight. The trip to Iran was a very important trip. The minister had went to Iran in 1996, where he spoke, and you may have heard him mention it in his lecture, 6 million people were in that square. And it was on the day, February 11th, 1979, is when Khomeini took over. And you have to know the history of the Persian Empire. They're Persian people. Geography, to me, I came up, I'm a victim, as I say, of the public school system in New York City. Because there's about 40 people or 50 in a classroom. And they moved everybody out to the next class because they had to make room for the others. Whether you passed or failed, you were out of there into the next class. But one thing that the Jewish teachers in New York that dominated the New York City public school system taught was geography. I learned the world in those classes. It made you understand where China was. You know, when the brothers started going to Vietnam in the early 60s to fight, most of them said, Vietnam? What is that?
Where is that?
Where is that? Yeah. They had no idea where Vietnam was. They just didn't know. So, but when people talk about places, like right now, President Trump is in Argentina. Now, some people go to the map and say, well, where the hell is Argentina? Okay?
South
Here,
America.
this is Argentina down here. He met in Helsinki at the last summit. But if you don't know the world, you don't take an interest in the world.
That's right.
You just don't take, see, when they say something to you, they say Helsinki. They said in Crimea, the Russian ship attacked the ships from the Ukraine. What the hell is the Ukraine? What is the Ukraine? See, they keep talking about Turkey and Istanbul.
Yes,
or they're
sir.
talking about Saudi Arabia today. Okay, you have to know that. So when you get your children, and this is important for them, and you start teaching them, now, if I didn't become a Muslim, I wouldn't know anything about it. You tell them about the slave trade, how the slaves were brought across. The Caribbean became the clearance place where they would clean them up and separate the bad ones from the good ones and then ship them over to America to be sold. You happen to live in a state that the last slave ship, can anybody tell me what year it was? And where?
It was Africa Town in the
1859 in Mobile.
That's right.
A boat full of slaves came directly in because, don't forget, they had stopped the transatlantic slave trade, but the demand for slaves was so great that they were still sneaking slaves out of Africa and bringing them into America.
That's right.
But when I went to Mobile, and it's an unbelievable history about that slave ship that came in, the last one that they have on record, that they can testify. But anyway, this is the map of the world. And even though they say the map is not, and this is the little area that white folks, they're not natives to no land but Europe right here. But they broke out of Europe and conquered the known world. And so when you get your children and you put a map of Africa or put it on your tablet and sit them down, they become more worldly in the knowledge of the world. Not worldly in a filthy way, but they begin to know. Right now, at the center of the problems of the world is the Middle East. If they say that there's a war in Yemen, that America are back in what country?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. America is back in Saudi Arabia in a war in Yemen. Here's Yemen right down here. But if you get the average person and say, go to the map and show me Yemen, they wouldn't know. Or if you get a map and you say this is a map of Africa, right here's Africa, and you say, where does Barack Obama's father come from?
Kenya.
Kenya. So show me Kenya on the map.
It's in the center.
People, they wouldn't know. So you have to, and they're not going to teach you this in school.
That's right.
Tell me a school that's teaching you this.
No, sir.
They don't teach you that.
No.
See, so they keep your mind limited.
That's right.
They keep your mind on stuff. I mean, look at thousands of people at a football game.
Right.
You ask them academically some questions. But you say, there's nothing wrong with football. It isn't. But one of the great leaders of Africa said it should be a participation sport. You should play it instead of watching it, okay? You need to get involved like that. but the people are not being fed intellectually so that they would understand something about the world that they live in.
That's right.
Okay? So I just want to say that now, when you leave, Brother Earl in the back will have maps so you can take it home and get little Kwame or little Muhammad or little Qasim and stand them in front of the map and say, name me 10 countries in Africa. What part of Africa did most of the people that's in America come from? Where did they get the slaves from? Where's Egypt at? Where's South Africa at? And that way your children can grow, and as they grow and learn in school, they have an idea and a feel for the world. Now, the minister went to Iran, and I just want to tell you, I can't tell you everything, but one of the most beautiful parts, his host, who's a college professor at the University of Tehran, which is the capital of Iran, and you get a map. If you go to a map and you look and you see where Iran is at, it's a huge country.
That's right.
It comes from the Persian Empire, and in 1953, a man named Mossadegh took over Iran, and he wanted Iran and its oil and its wealth to go to the people, but America and England didn't want him in power, so they formulated a coup. They overthrew him, and they put the young Shah on the throne, and they protected him. They gave him all kind of weapons. But at the core of what was happening, they were taking them away. It's called cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism is when black women look at their beautiful black face in the mirror and think that the black skin is a badge of dishonor. You go to the store and get Amion and put it on. Amion is for black spots. They look at their whole face as a black spot and put it on hoping that they can become lighter. There is, what is the baseball player from Dominican Republic?
Sammy Sosa.
Sammy Sosa. Get a picture of him 10 years ago and get a picture of him right now. He went and had his skin lightened, bleached through injections. And he looks terrible. I mean, Michael Jackson did the same thing, but Michael said he had a disease. I don't know about that. You know, the disease certainly didn't make that nose look like a white man. So, but that's cultural imperialism. That means that a man with a dominant culture imposes his culture on you. This is the beauty of us accepting Islam. That's right. You know, because once we learn Islam, we love the way God created us. That's right. We love the way Allah made us. And I'm not trying to look like the enemy. I was in a store yesterday in Georgia, and they were having the display for Christmas. They had a big display of dolls. And I walked around this display, and it's in a mixed neighborhood with a lot of black people in this neighborhood. And I walked around the whole display. There was not one black doll on display. So a person who doesn't have a knowledge of themselves will go there and buy a white doll and give it to a black baby. So that baby grows up looking at a white doll and thinking that the beauty is to be white. I was in the country of Burkina Faso. My daughter and I, and we went to the doll display in this mall in Ouagadougou, which is the capital of Burkina Faso, is a country in Africa. And all of the dolls, this is a black country with black people, barely see a white person. All of the dolls were white. That's a problem. So in my book, Africa in the World, I thought I had one up here. I want you to look at it. There's a chapter in here about the country of the Gambia. You know where the Gambia is? Anybody know anything about the Gambia? Oh, okay. Yeah, I found it. Yes, thank you. Yes. In my book, there's a chapter about a brother named Yahya Jammeh of the Gambia. And even though there's some differences in here and there, but I take my hat off to him because he is the first president on the African continent that banned bleaching cream and made it against the law to sell it and against the law to use it. All right. And so, I mean, I take my hat. I wrote an article about him and that particular thing. So cultural imperialism is one of the things that happened. So what happened in Iran, and I'm going to go through this quickly. The minister went there in February 11, 1996. spoke to 6 million people, another 11 million people watching it on television. What happened in that country? And why is America, in particular Trump, we have a president in the White House whose elevator doesn't go to the top?
Yes,
And
sir.
so he needs to see us shrink.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And he's fighting it, but he's crazy as a rule lizard.
Yes, sir.
And what he has done is not only messed up America, but he's messed up most of the world.
That's right.
And so what happened is that he's got a thing against Iran because they have nuclear capability.
Mm-hmm.
Plus he's trying to get the Muslim world, who are Sunnis, to go against him and fight because they're Shia.
Mm-hmm.
So in Yemen, you've been hearing about Yemen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you know that these people are dying. Nearly 10,000 people have already died. There's starvation. It's going to be a world crisis unless something happens. But America is using its weapons and his military skills to back up the people, the Yemenese people who are fighting against the Houthi, who are Shiites. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. There's a branch of Islam that are Shiites, okay? And there's a branch of Islam that they're Sunnis, they call themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country, and they got a young man on the throne that is problematic. He's definitely a problem, especially after the killing of Khashoggi. That's a big problem for them. But they're the keepers of the 2 sacred spots of Islam. The 2 sacred spots of Medina and Mecca, which is right here in Saudi Arabia, which is, you see, they only put Riyadh on here, which is the capital of Saudi Arabia. But over here is Mecca, and then north of Mecca is Medina. And they're given that charge, but yet and still, and people look at them as keepers of the religious faith and the protectors of Mecca, where Muslims make their Hajj, but they get involved in this war in Yemen. They get involved in killing somebody in the opposition who is writing against the government and so forth. And there's no doubt that they're involved in the killing, but Trump won't stand up against them because he said the interests of America and the billions of dollars that they make in Saudi Arabia, and he may have done what he did in Russia, when he borrowed some money from them or had them to give him some money. And so he don't want to say nothing too bad about them because they will reveal him. So when the minister went this time, he sat down because Iran is a country that believes in the Mahdi, that the appearance of the Mahdi to bring in the last day. There's a book, Brother Earl, you could write it down so that we can order some copies of it as I travel. It's called The Mahdi, and by McQuillan. It's a novel, but it is a most fascinating, interesting book because the control of the Muslim world is based on oil. That's why the struggle in Syria, the Iraq, they destroyed, killed Saddam Hussein, but it has tremendous oil. Here, right next door, is Iran with tremendous oil. And here's Saudi Arabia, they say that has more oil reserved than any other country. All of these are oil countries. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, all of these are oil countries. And then this book, a novel, they wanted to know America has to control this oil area. All of this in the Middle East, in the heart of Muslims. And so they got together, the CIA group met. And they said in this book, what are the Muslims looking for? And one of them said they're looking for a Mahdi. And so one of them at the table said, well, why don't we make one? Make a Mahdi and let him be our man, and then we will control the Muslim world. So they went about doing it. And the Russians were watching. This is really an interesting novel. But the very fact that they picked this topic, because at the root of what they were doing is the absolute truth. And so when the neocons came in, they targeted 7 nations in the Muslim world that they wanted to destroy. And destroy, I mean destroy the leadership unless the leadership was compliant with them. And that's what they did. Libya, look at Libya. Libya, the two best oils to be found anywhere in the world. Does anybody know where they are? Okay. Nigeria. That's why there's always this scramble and war in Nigeria, fighting. It has the best oil. And the next one is Libya. Best, it's called, Earl, it's called what, Bonnie Light?
Bonnie Light, yes, sir.
And this means that it's easy to make diesel or gasoline, very easy and very cost efficient. And the two countries that have the best oil in the world is Libya and Nigeria. So they wanted to control this part of the Muslim world, and now they got the Muslim world in complete chaos. Fighting one another. The tragedy of Yemen is a terrible tragedy. And we visited this country, Minister Farrakhan's delegation. I was blessed to be a part of that delegation. We visited this country and we saw the beauty. This is before the war broke out. Beautiful people. We went to a school in the eastern part of the country called Mustafa Madrasa, where all of these thousands of students were being trained. But now the Muslim world is in chaos. Here's the country of Somalia. Since 1991, when the leader was overthrown, and I always wondered, what was all of this about Somalia? Come to find out, Chevron had found tremendous oil in Somalia, and they capped it because they wanted to hold it for a strategic period because of where it's located. Right here, the straits going right through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, out across the Mediterranean into America. And so this oil in this spot is strategic, and they didn't want anything to happen to it, so they overthrew the leader, and the country has been in chaos ever since. Okay? So, but when they wanted, they will straighten the country out and try to get that oil out of the country. So when Minister Farrakhan went to Iran, and the reason that this trip to me was really, it was insightful, it made a tremendous impact. He met with the spiritual leader because Iran is a theocracy. It means that it's ruled by religious leadership. There's a supreme leader, even though there's political people, but the real power is in the religious people. And I just want to tell you this short story. When the young Shah was in charge, they had the 2,500 year anniversary of the great Persian Empire. Unbelievable story about Persia. Islam swept through that area and they all became Muslims. And so on that day, the Shah of Iran invited Jimmy Carter to toast the anniversary. And the Shah of Iran did the toast with alcohol. And that was it. Khomeini was already teaching. He had left Iran and he was living in Iran. And then, and he was making cassette tapes and feeding his people and telling them to come back to faith. You know, leave off, the women had taken off their headpieces. They were wearing short dresses. There was partying, alcohol was flowing in the country. And in the Western world didn't feel that nobody could turn that around. Yeah. It says, how can you keep them on the farm once they've seen parity? And so they felt that they had them. But when the Shah stood up in front of millions of his people and drank alcohol as a toast to the history of the Persian Empire, all of it flipped. Khomeini gained power. Then he had to leave Iraq and he went to Paris. And then on February the 11th, 1979, the Shah was out. And when the Shah was out, he was like a bum. He was going, first he went to Egypt, then he went to Morocco. And he came for a while. America wouldn't let him in America, though he was their boy. And that's the way America do with all the people who want to side with the enemy of God. They'll bring you in, make a promise to you. Brothers who go to jail, that's what they do. They make you plea bargain. They say, you give us something, we'll give you something. Right now, you're facing 50 years. But if you help us with something, snitch on somebody, wear a wire, do this or that, tell on somebody, then instead of us giving you the 50 years, we'll cut it down to 20 years.
Still losing. Yes,
They
sir.
took the poor Shaw. He was running around the world, nowhere to go. He was in Panama. You read the history of it. Why didn't America say, you've been our helper? You know, you helped us and so forth, and we sold you tons of weapons. Come to America and we'll take care of you here. No way. They kicked him to the curb and he ended up dying of cancer. But the lesson in his life is don't make a bargain with the devil.
That's
You
right.
can't make no deals with the devil.
That's right.
Go
He
ahead.
is not no nice guy.
That's right.
He is unprincipled.
Yes, sir.
He's an absolute bum.
That's
You
right.
understand? So when you say, well, you know, just bury me. So I'd rather die as a man on my feet than allow them to turn me into a snitch where I go against my own
Yes,
people
sir.
because I'm trying to save my
Yes,
raggedy
sir.
behind.
Go ahead.
You understand? So that's what happened to the Shaw. The same thing happened to Mobutu in the Congo. He served America.
Yep.
He helped even the South Africans fight against the brothers who were trying to liberate themselves in Namibia. He was America's boy in Zaire. And when they were finished with him, they kicked him straight under the bus. And what is interesting, this is not a part of my talk, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. So when America was kicking him to the curb, he went to see the brother who despised him because he was on America's side. He left the DRC and went to Libya. And we happened to be in Libya when he went to see Gaddafi. And so I went over and talked to his people about him meeting Minister Farrakhan. And he was happy to meet him because he was in trouble. And then he invited us to come to the Democratic Republic. And we went to his home village, we met him, and he was pleading his case of what he served America well, and America got rid of him. So it's a lesson to all of us. You know, even the brothers who join the police force and become harder on black people
That's right.
than the white policeman.
Exactly.
Trying to prove to his master, I'm gonna treat, you think you treat him bad, white master, watch the way I treat him.
Exactly.
So that was the thing that happened with this brother. And the richest piece of real estate in the world is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And those who studied, you know, coltan is found here. What is coltan used in? Anybody know? Cell phones. Wow. You don't have a cell phone without coltan. Billions of cell phones, and the ingredient or the metal substance that they need for a cell phone comes out of the Congo. And that's why there's so much trouble in the eastern part of the Congo. Let me finish this up. I got a few more things I want to say. So when the minister was there, okay, he went there in 1996, February 11th, spoke at the square. Then he went back this recent trip. And he was sitting with the host and a professor, a doctor at Tehran University. And the minister was telling him about the Mahdi, because they believe in the Mahdi. And they're waiting for the appearance of the Mahdi. And the minister said to him, we believe that the Mahdi has already appeared.
That's right.
He appeared in America, came in the person of Master Fahd Muhammad.
Right, sir.
He raised up the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The minister ran it down to him.
Yeah.
Then the professor sat there, looking at it, he said, well, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
And the minister said, well, I don't expect you to believe it because you just heard it.
Yeah.
But it was a heavy set. And then they arranged a meeting with the supreme leader, Khomeini, who was the man who took over when Imam Khomeini died. And he is the spiritual leader that wields all of the power in Iran. And they set up a meeting, and they brought all of the members of the government and all of the ayatollahs, and the minister, he spoke, and then he invited the minister to come to the mic and speak. And the minister ran down our history in America and our struggle, and that we are trying to raise Muslims in America, to change the course of history in reality.
That's right.
The beautiful part about it that most black people, and I'm saying in my closing remarks, that you're here in Montgomery, Alabama. You have a chance to make an impact on this community. But you can't sit around, you know, we said, will you sit up home and wait for the mystery car? No, you can't sit around, Allah's going to wave a wand over Montgomery. And one day everybody in the street, where's the mosque at? I want to go to the mosque. See, you are living in some kind of spook land, or you're smoking something you shouldn't be smoking. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen when you go to work. You know, in the nation we have a saying, everything is for real.
That's right.
The real problem is our people in the streets.
Yes, sir.
The jails in America, and when we went through that museum, you see the focus on the jails.
That's right.
Because we have the largest jail population in the world.
That's right.
China has 1.6 billion people. America has 326 million people. And the jail population in America is larger than the jail population of China. And our jail is dominated by black men and women.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Are we born criminals?
No, sir.
You know, we got all of this is learned behavior
That's
under
right.
this white man who
Go ahead.
put us in those
Right.
crews of those ships
Go
that
ahead.
brought us to America.
That's right.
We didn't come here in the savage condition
No,
that you
sir.
find us.
Go ahead.
This
No,
is
sir.
learned behavior under the white man.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And so to liberate us from this behavior that he taught us is the teaching of Islam.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
you got to administer. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, the message to the black man, my only assignment or mission, I'm not quoting it perfect, but you read it, is to teach you the truth. That's his job. So that's your job. And so you can't hope that the mosque will be full. You can't hope that people will just come and join. You got to make it happen.
Yes, sir.
So you got to get the young brothers into the school, on the campuses. You got to get, and the young brothers in the street who are the thugs. Imagine how they gave crack cocaine to our community. The brother told me the year that it came into Montgomery, 1988. And you have to know the history of crack cocaine, know about the struggle in Nicaragua and how the American government had drugs brought into the West Coast and how those drugs moved across the country. But they needed a cheap synthetic use of the cocaine that was highly addictive.
Yes, sir.
And they got all of our young brothers and sisters strung out on crack cocaine and destroyed families and lives.
Yes, sir.
Locked up the prison population, boom. They had to build more jails, holding the people that they made addicted to this drug that destroyed our family.
That's right.
So you got to have the strength to break away from it. But your ability to teach the young, they don't know nothing about where drugs come from. There's a book that I use as I travel. It's called Cocaine Nation. When it came out in London by Tom Fielding, and not Tom Fielding, the great artist from Black Man from South Carolina, but this is the Fielding spelled the German way. He wrote this book. When they brought it to America, they called it Cocaine Nation. But the history of drugs in this book will blow your mind. And one of the histories that you have to get the young brother, you know, Freeway Rick. See, now all in the streets, like when my generation, when they went to jail, they were reading Iceberg Slim, Donald Goins, you know, and all of that. That's what they were reading. But today, this generation want to know about Freeway Rick, Rick Ross. You know, and he tried to get the rapper, he tried to sue the rapper who was using his name, because that's not his real name. But he was using it because he became a big dope dealer. You know, they glorified jail. To an empty-headed Negro, going to jail is nothing to glorify. But going to jail and you come out, and they use guys like 50 Cent and Lil Wayne. You know, Lil Wayne always going to jail for something. But every time he come out, you know that there's a big concert, full-page ad. Lil Wayne is home and he's going to entertain. See, and to a young Negro who got an empty mind and got a pea brain, that's your job to teach him. Say, brother, no, that's not what you want to do. That's what the white man wants you to do. You're so afraid to say to the white man that you don't, I don't want nobody to think I'm racist. But who did it to you? And now you need some sense to pull yourself out of that. So the only way, you got to give them a history. You got to sit them down. The young bucks in the street who got a gun in their pocket and either a crack pot or smoking dope or popping pills or something, those are our babies. We can't avoid them, say we got to get on the other side of the street, those niggas over there, excuse the expression, over there, so and so. Oh, you got to go right up to them.
That's right.
Brother, I want to save your life. What do you mean you want to save my life? I don't need you to save my life. You need something.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Strung out on drugs, living in the street, shooting people, breaking into houses.
Yes, sir.
It's your job to go after them
Yes, sir.
and teach them.
That's right.
And once you start popping that wisdom on them and giving them some history lessons, you know, how did you get to America? Then you start. Where did you come from? You know, who put you on the plantation?
That's
Who
right.
robbed you of your language and your name? I mean, the day I ran into a brother at the airport, leaving Atlanta, and he looked at my name, my slave name was on my ID. And he was saying, I know that name. My slave name is Prescott. I don't usually say that. He said, are you related to the football player Prescott? I said, we may be, because not that many, you know, Alabama has more Prescotts than any other state. And so he kept talking to me. He said, well, they gave us all names. He said, my name is Johnson. That ain't my real name. That means that they're waking up.
That's right.
Right.
See, that means that there's awakening going
Yes, sir.
on. He ended up looking at my name, Prescott, and he related it to a football player. Then he started talking about the white man that named us all.
Yeah.
And then he said that, yeah, because, you know, most of us are Johnson and Jackson and Smith
Williams.
and Williams and Jones. He said so because Prescott is kind of an odd name in the slave master's name. But look at the conversation I'm having with a TSA officer.
Right.
It means that there's an awakening.
Yes, sir.
And somebody's got to do the job. And I have to say to you, that is our job.
Yes, sir.
The last thing I want to say is that when the minister was in Iran, it was heavy because the supreme leader met with him. He had a press conference that everybody went all through that part of the world. And the minister was talking about this little nation of Islam inside of America that's going to change the course of history. And one thing that there's a book that I carry, it's called A Negotiation. I tried to order something, I couldn't work out a deal, but this is a novel. You know what a novel is, you know.
Yes, sir.
Fiction. But it's fiction based on something that this writer got from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Herman Cardwell Gilbert. This book was written in 1983. I must have got it in 84 when we were in the Final Call building. And let me tell you what I've read in here that sticks with me this very day. That there was a referendum. Things were so bad in America as they are right now. The funeral of this brother tomorrow in Birmingham, and all of the other brothers. Michael Brown's death really kicked it off, but it was going before. But Michael Brown's death out of St. Louis, an area called Ferguson, went across the country, and there were demonstrations in just about every major city. That was different. So things got bad in America. This writer said, and they called for a referendum. Things got bad between the black and white population. And the referendum was to decide, let black people vote whether they wanted to separate or stay here with white folks. And that's why he calls it the negotiation. And what surprised them, according to the writer in the book, is that the referendum to separate won. Black people were fed up. They were tired of fighting every day. I was in a store with my wife, and one of the store monitors came down the aisle to look at what we were doing.
Wow.
I mean, I'm a 76-year-old man. What, I'm going to steal some popcorn? Some bubble gum or something? See, but that's the way they look at it.
That's
Right.
That's why that man shot that brother in the mall.
In the gallery.
Because he was a black man.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
And the rifle, the National Rifle Association said that there's nothing better than a good guy with a gun to defeat a bad guy with a gun. You know, that madness that they say. Here was a good guy with a gun, a black man with a permit to carry the gun, trying to break up a shootout in the mall And soon as the police came and saw that brother, they shot him. And I thought they shot him in the back or something. They shot him in the head. Matter of fact, the brother was just telling me, Brother Maurice leave already? Maurice was telling me that they had to get some people to fix his head up so they could have a funeral. In an open coffin. So black people were fed up and they wanted to leave. So they had to find, it's called negotiation, because they had to find a black man who could negotiate with the American government for us to depart. Now, I mean, some of you won't realize until we talk separation how much you love white folks. How you feel secure with them. I don't like no black supervisor. I'm going to white man's store. Negroes make me sick. Negroes and flies, I do the flies. The more I deal with Negroes, the better I like flies. So this is the mentality of us. But with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we can change that.
That's right.
Thank you, Mel. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mom, sir.